Hey friends, I hope your week is off to a great start. Today I'm going to be trying out Rick Martinez's recipe for BA's Best Apple Cider Donuts. One of my very favorite things about the fall season is apple cider in all of its many forms. Chilled, hot, spiked, but most importantly, donut. So when I saw this recipe, I knew that I had to try it out. I do these Bon Appetit recipe tests every single Wednesday. If you like this one, please be sure to give me a big thumbs up and click subscribe. Without any further ado, let's see how this goes. As always, I'll leave a link to the recipe and ingredient quantities in the description box below. So I'm doing something a little different for this recipe, and that's starting with the wet ingredients. So the reason for that is we have to reduce this 3 cups of apple cider down to 1/3 of a cup. So it's gonna take a while. And you'll notice here I made a pan switch. I originally started with the saucepan, and then thinking about it further, I thought more surface area is probably better, so I switched to a 10-inch skillet, just thinking that that would evaporate the liquid off more quickly. So you want to reduce this until it's thick, syrupy, and is about 1/3 of a cup. So it doesn't have to be exactly right, but you can see the texture of mine is really starting to thicken up, and as I scrape the spatula on the bottom, it does hold a bit of a track. So once you reach that stage, you can go ahead and drain that off into a measuring cup and let it cool slightly. I had maybe a tablespoon over the 1/3 of a cup that I was looking for. If you're not familiar with apple butter, it's the perfect time of year to get familiar with it. It's got the flavor of cider and the texture of applesauce, so it's a great spread to use on toast or bagels, and is typically in the same aisle as jelly, though during the fall you might find it in the seasonal section of the store. Once I've got all the wet ingredients together, I'm just giving it a quick whisk to get everything combined, and then I'm setting this aside until we're ready for it. So moving on to the dry ingredients, I'm starting as I always do by converting the cups into grams, and you'll notice that I am using freshly grated nutmeg again. During the pumpkin bread video, I mentioned that it's worth the while to buy whole nutmeg, especially during the fall and winter. However, if you don't want to do that, you can certainly use pre-ground. You're just going to half the quantity. So with both the wet and dry ingredients prepared, I'm combining the butter and 2 types of sugar in the bowl of my stand mixer with the paddle attachment. So you're going to beat this on medium to high speed until it's light and fluffy. The recipe said this would take 4 minutes. My mixer has a scraper beater, so it wipes down the sides for me. So that reduces the mixing time by about 60%. So this took for me only about 2 minutes actually. So once the batter's looking super light and fluffy and the color's really pale, we can go ahead and add the eggs one at a time. So after each egg, you want to beat really well to make sure there are no yolk streaks remaining. So once both of those eggs are evenly incorporated, we can go ahead and start adding the prepped dry and wet ingredients. And we're going to do this in 2 additions, alternating between dry and wet. As you can see, once we've got all the ingredients incorporated, the batter is really sticky looking, and the fragrance of it is absolutely delicious. It smells just like apple cider, so you're going to enjoy this while you make it. So I'm turning the dough out onto floured parchment paper, which is something I haven't done before. Normally you're going directly onto the work surface. However, this dough is so sticky that I think putting it on the parchment really does help you out here. So I'm being pretty generous with the amount of flour I'm using. This dough is incredibly sticky, so it was a little bit challenging to work with. As Carla says, you don't get bonus points for not using enough flour. Don't be a hero. So I am using the appropriate amount of flour that I needed. And I've got this rolled out to a 1/2 inch thick. I started off using regular cling film and didn't feel like I was getting a tight seal. So I decided to press the cling film against the surface of the dough and then use my press and seal to actually seal the air on the outside of the pan. So this needs to chill for 3 hours at a minimum, and during that 3-hour period, I think you are getting a little bit of skin formation on the dough because when you fry it, it gets super craggy. So the dough is really easy to work with when cold. It pops right out. There was no sticking. As the dough starts to come up to room temperature as you re-roll it, you are going to have a little bit more sticking happening. So if you need to use some extra flour, by all means do that. You can re-roll the scraps as many times as you need to. I was trying to be very mindful to not overwork it because I didn't want to develop the gluten and get tough donuts toward the end. So once you can't punch out any more donuts, just use the remaining dough scraps to make donut holes. And if you can't punch a donut hole, you can even roll it into a ball and just flatten with the palm of your hand. So this really is a zero waste recipe. Once you've got all the donuts punched out, you can go ahead and drop them into your preheated oil. And while these donuts cook for about 3 minutes on each side, it's a great time to prep the cinnamon and sugar that we're going to dust these in. So it's a super basic recipe. It's just cinnamon and sugar whisked together, so it's really not rocket science. The one thing I will say is keep an eye on your oil temperature, because when you drop the donuts in, the temperature is going to dip. So you do want to crank the heat on your burner up a little bit to help it recover as quickly as possible. However, you don't want the temperature to go too much over 350 Fahrenheit, otherwise you're going to get dark donuts that aren't cooked in the centers. So I let my donuts sit for 30 to 45 seconds before dusting them in the cinnamon and sugar. And the rule with frying is that you need to flavor it while it's still warm. So you saw this when I made the mozzarella sticks, you have to salt it while it's still hot or the salt will just fall off. Same story here with the donuts. If you waited for these to cool down, nothing will stick to them. So don't let the donuts cool down too much or you're not going to get a great coating of cinnamon and sugar on them. So I was getting a little bit impatient at the end and I ended up frying all of my donut holes in one batch. I really wish I had done it in 2 separate batches because these cook for about half the time on the full-size donuts. So by the time I had all the donut holes into the oil, it was already time to start flipping them. And there were so many in the pan, it was hard to keep track of who had been flipped and who hadn't. So I would definitely recommend doing your holes in 2 separate batches. All right, the donuts are complete and still slightly warm to the touch. And the surface here is kind of everything that I'm looking for. It's slightly craggy, nice coating of cinnamon and sugar on the outside. So it looks beautiful, and the fragrance coming off of these donuts is unbelievable. It smells exactly like fall, and I'm super excited to dig in. The outside is nice and crispy, and the inside really puffed up, so it's nice and airy inside. This is good. So the texture inside here is really nice and light. I like how that contrasts against the kind of crispy, crunchy outside. So I kind of really like everything that's going on with this donut. Beyond the taste, the weight of this donut. This is a serious donut, so probably only eat 1, maybe 2 of these, but really, really good. Now for the little baby donut holes, so still crispy, craggy top. The ratio of cinnamon to sugar on the donut holes, you're getting a lot more kind of coating on this. But the inside looks really nice. Still puffy, still got the crispy outside. So the donut holes are super tasty too. Overall, I'm really pleased with these apple cider donuts, and I'm glad that I'm kicking off my fall enjoying them. So I really hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you did, please be sure to give me a big thumbs up and click subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week.